Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Alexis Badenmeyer. I'm the political director of the Organic Consumers Association, and today I am talking with Dr. Sainath Suryanarayanan, staff scientist at US Right to Know. Sai is leading US Right to Know's investigation of the origins of SARS-CoV-2 and the hazards of biosafety laboratories and gain-of-function experiments. These are experiments which actually, the purpose of the experiments is to make dangerous pathogens more infectious or more lethal for human beings. So Sai has a professional background in the sociology of science and technology, as well as in biology. He's the lead author of Vanishing Bees, Science, Politics, and Honeybee Health. That book was published in 2017 by Rutgers University Press. In Vanishing Bees, he shows how the historical interactions between entomologists in land-grant universities, farmers, beekeepers, and agrochemical companies have shaped what we know and what we don't know about the interplay between pesticides and bees. Welcome, Sai. So, Sai,
thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Alexis.
You are definitely the right person to help us find out what we are allowed to know and not know about the origins of COVID-19. So your most recent work at US Right to Know is a series of FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. And the most exciting one, in my opinion, and the one that you're going to take to the courts now, is with the National Institutes of Health. Now, I remember when it came out in the Wall Street Journal and in Science Magazine that the National Institutes of Health was actually investigating the origins of COVID-19. And it wasn't the natural origins of COVID-19 that they were investigating. They weren't looking at pangolins or civet cats or dromedaries or any other type of animal that may have been an intermediary to humans getting COVID-19. They were actually looking into the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I'll let you take it from there. Tell us about the NIH's investigation and what you hope to do and to learn by getting Freedom of Information Act documents from the National Institutes of Health.
Right. So we actually would like to learn about the NIH's investigation. We don't really know much about what sort of investigation the NIH is doing concerning the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other affiliated entities in connection to the emergence of SARS-CoV-2. And so the intention of with the National Institutes of Health, this is early July of this year, that our intent was to find out what does the NIH know and not know regarding the kinds of gain-of-function experiments, the kind of coronavirus research that was happening at Wuhan Institute of Virology that the NIH funded via this nonprofit organization, American organization called EcoHealth Alliance. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we were asking for communications between specific NIH employees, EcoHealth Alliance personnel, and personnel entities connected with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So we wanted to know what sorts of knowledge does the NIH have regarding these issues?
Yeah, so there was a letter from the National Institutes of Health. It was sent to EcoHealth Alliance, which was funded by the US government, but was working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And in this letter, they asked specifically for an inspection of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And they wanted an outside team to examine the facility's labs, examine their records. And what they wanted to know is they said this should be done with, quote, specific attention to addressing the question of whether the Wuhan Institute of Virology staff had SARS-CoV-2 in their possession prior to December 2019. Now, I think for people who haven't researched this issue like you have, that's just an astonishing question. How would it even be possible that a laboratory could have SARS-CoV-2 in their possession? Didn't this come from bats? Isn't it natural? Why are people even investigating this?
Right. I mean, that's the multi-trillion-dollar and multiple lives and livelihoods question, correct? Just there's a lot of pieces that don't fit the animal origin story that's prevailing, and what US Right to Know and other scientists actually are increasingly asking about are the possibilities of a lab release of SARS-CoV-2 from laboratories that are situated in the city of Wuhan. And I can just contextualize and give you briefly, sort of the rationale for these calls for investigating the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Wuhan Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So these are two of the main institutes conducting coronavirus research in Wuhan. There are others as well, but these are some of the two of the main ones that are close enough to the seafood market, the Huanan seafood market, where it is believed that the first original cluster of infections broke out. So, I mean, as soon as COVID hit, very soon after, scientists were actually coming out with theories that this probably came from bats, as previous SARS-related epidemics have, like the Middle Eastern coronavirus SARS epidemic, and then also the original SARS epidemic that came out in 2003, both linked to bats and with intermediate host animals. In this case as well, bats have been, hypothesized. Except the question here is, how did bat coronavirus that may be closely related to SARS-CoV-2, how did a bat coronavirus that was found, say, 1,000 miles away in the caves of Yunnan in southern China, how did that end up suddenly causing an outbreak in Wuhan, of all the places, without leaving any reported infections or deaths in between? If there was somebody who traveled from, say, Yunnan to Wuhan, who was potentially infected, one would imagine reports of infections and deaths in the interim journey. None have been reported. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't happen. There are infections and deaths that go unreported. And so the question still remains, though, and it needs to be asked, is the close proximity of these research institutes that were collecting bat coronaviruses, including the closest known relative of SARS-CoV-2, which is this RETG13 bat coronavirus that was found in Yunnan. It was brought to Wuhan and stored and possibly manipulated in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, manipulated in experiments that involved gain-of-function work, possibly. We don't know that. Maybe serially passaged through humanized cell cultures to be adapted to human receptors. All these kinds of work have been done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They have been done with coronaviruses. Gain-of-function work is well known in coronaviruses, and Wuhan Institute of Virology is one of the leading institutes in the world that's involved in that kind of work in collaboration with EcoHealth Alliance, NIH, and universities in the US. So the question remains about what kind of research, gain-of-function experimental research is being done at these institutes in Wuhan. And knowing that would then allow us to have a better grip, better idea about could these institutes have been an accidental source of the release of SARS-CoV-2. There are scenarios that have happened before. Lab leaks are not uncommon. There's a history and very good documentation of multiple lab leaks that are well known. And the scenario in which a researcher is either bit or scratched by an infected animal and then walks out and then passes that virus to others is not inconceivable, is not in the realm of impossible, is in the realm of possible. And there's some circumstantial evidence in the case of SARS-CoV-2 that suggests that it's in the realm of the plausible as well. There are certain features of SARS-CoV-2 that are very unusual and that seem to suggest that would be very unusual for a virus that just emerged from jumped from animal to human. And we can discuss those unusual features as well.
Yes, before we do that, I think it's important to dig deeper into why. Like, when I first started looking into this, I had no clue that scientists were even doing such a thing, to take a pathogen that currently isn't harming humans and then make it deadly to human beings or infectious to human beings or more easily spread amongst human beings. Why would anyone do this?
And I mean, many virologists and scientists and folks in the public are actively wondering that. Two common reasons that are cited are one is the threat of bioterror, and so the idea being that what's going to happen if this virus or these sets of viruses fall into the wrong hands, and so let's find out if this virus is really manipulable. Can we really manipulate this virus, and can we really create a sort of super virus that can cause problems? And that would then suggest that others might be able to create this as well. So scenario number one, rationale number one, is biodefense. And then sorry, go ahead.
Let me interrupt this for a sec, because I think that one is very disturbing.
It is very disturbing.
And
yes.
And I don't know if you're old enough to have lived or to have been, old enough to know what was going on when the Anthrax attacks happened in 2000. But very soon after there were anthrax attacks in the United States, which were terrorist attacks that looked like they were coming from the Middle East. But it turns out that the anthrax that was in the envelopes that were sent to 2 US senators and as well to many news outlets, that anthrax actually it was taken from and used by people in the US military. So in Fort Detrick, close to where I live in Maryland, there's a lab called USAMRIID, the US Army Research Lab for Infectious Diseases. And actually in the New York Times in October of 2001, so actually right before the anthrax attacks happened and people were paying attention to this issue, New York Times reporter Judith Miller reported that the CIA had several secret projects on anthrax. And like you're saying, the excuse that they gave for having these projects was that maybe terrorists will use anthrax against us. And or maybe the Russians are developing weapons with anthrax. And so in these secret projects, one was called Clear Vision, one was called Project Jefferson. They set up so-called terrorist labs. They pretended to be terrorists and played with creating weapons out of anthrax. And then there were other projects that involved creating bomblets out of anthrax. So anthrax wouldn't normally disperse easily through the air. But if you make it into very fine particles, you can not exactly aerosolize it, but at least you can make it so that if you ripped open an envelope, poof, the anthrax would come out and hang in the air. And so it turned out when these, so-called terrorist attacks happened, it was US created anthrax.
Uh-huh.
So I just wanted to interrupt to editorialize a bit about how improper it is for governments to pretend to be terrorists and create weaponized pathogens, especially considering that the United States has such a poor track record on preventing these weapons from being used. I guess, it got pinned on a scientist named Bruce Ivins. Most people involved in the investigation now say that there wasn't really enough evidence against him, and he committed suicide before he could be tried, before the evidence against him could be weighed in a court. So it's all very fishy, but go on. Tell us now other reasons, or perhaps now I'm biased, I'll say they're excuses. What other reasons do scientists give for making pathogens more dangerous in their laboratories?
Well, the second big reason is sort of a preemptive understanding, if you may call it, of a potential pandemic spreading event. So in this case, let's enhance the pathogenicity of a given virus that we know is already dangerous. Let's make this virus that was not aerosolizable or transmittable through air, let's make it so that it's transmittable through air. And so in this scenario, can we then develop medical countermeasures, vaccines, to then to protect ourselves against such a mutation or set of mutations that may lead to this kind of a super virus evolving in nature, quote unquote. So to preempt this situation, another reason for gain of function work given is that, okay, let's just create such a virus ourselves in laboratories and see if we can handle it with vaccines or other countermeasures. Another really dangerous slope, and as virologists like Mark Lipsitch have argued, sort of fraught and maybe even not the right scientific approach, because it's actually really hard to predict the route or set of mutations that a virus undergoes in quote unquote nature to evolve into different forms. And so the idea that one can preempt that evolutionary phenomenon and sort of predict that in the laboratory is a fraught one as well, scientifically speaking.
Yeah, and to get into that a little aside, so the scientists who have been doing this research, working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, one of them is Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I know you know lots about Ralph Barrick because you've put in some FOIA requests he works at a public university. So the public university has a requirement to share documents relating to this research with the public. But one of the reasons that he and Peter Daszak at EcoHealth Alliance and presumably Shizhen Li at Wuhan Institute of Virology. They say, like you said, that they've been doing preemptive disease research and developing countermeasures. And their favorite medical countermeasure that they claim credit for, and they say that this research, this gain of function research contributes to, is remdesivir. And remdesivir is like a broad antiviral, and it should be able to work for lots of different viruses. I believe it was experimented with it a bit in Ebola, but it was found to be ineffective for Ebola. And essentially, from what I can tell, it was a drug looking for a disease that never really found the exact match. It was, pulled out again for coronavirus. And after many experiments, they decided that perhaps it can reduce your hospital stay. If you have a serious case of coronavirus, you end up in the hospital, you take remdesivir, and best case scenario, you get out of the hospital a couple of days early, which, of course, if you're in the hospital even an hour early, it's going to be a blessing. On the other hand, it hasn't proven to be the miracle drug that it's been promoted as. And certainly some people say that hydroxychloroquine, which was off patent, nobody can make any money from it. If it's given early enough, that's far more effective than remdesivir anyway. Do you have opinions on this or other, so-called wonder drugs that have been developed through this technology? Remdesivir is one of the only ones that I've heard of that these scientists who do this coronavirus research to make the virus more deadly are saying that they, you would think that if they've been doing this since 2003, when we had the first pandemic with SARS, because coronavirus is a SARS-like virus, you would think that they would be, we would have had a vaccine yesterday, that they could go through their files of all the viruses that they had created in the lab and the vaccine research that they had done on them and just find the right one. And we'd have a cure, as soon as you could sequence the virus. What are your thoughts on these reasons?
I don't have definitive thoughts right now. So stay tuned. Because all I can say right now is that we just got hold of Barrick records. And we are just beginning to sift through them. There's close to 100,000 or more pages to sift through. So perhaps for our next conversation, I'll have more definitive thoughts about this.
Wow, well, that's really great. I'm so glad that your work is bearing fruit already, and that it sounds like a lot of work yet ahead for you to sift through the documents.
We're just beginning.
Well, great. So we've talked about the biodefense reason for doing gain-of-function research. We've talked about potentially getting ahead of an emerging virus and developing antivirals or vaccines. Are there any other reasons that scientists give? Because there's also, just because we can. There are some scientists who resurrected the 1918 flu from dead bodies that had been put on ice. Are there scientists who are just doing this because they want to? And is that a good reason, in your opinion?
So there are scientists who are doing that for the sake of science. But those very scientists are also doing it for these other reasons. So all of these reasons are conflated together. They are intermingled, and maybe we can even say, interestingly, we can say perhaps that the reasons given for biodefense and / bioweapons are the same reasons given for developing vaccines and potentially thwarting the next pandemic. And / are also the reasons given among academic scientists for academic freedom and doing science for science sake. So a foremost proponent of science for science sake is Dr. Yoshihiro Kawaoka, actually from University of Wisconsin-Madison, from my own previous hometown. And so in Madison, Wisconsin, in the Midwest United States, Kawaoka working on very controversial gain-of-function experiments with influenza viruses and this reconstruction of the 1918 flu virus as well, and doing gain-of-function work where they were able to construct mutants that could then be passed between ferrets through just air, right? So air transmission. All of this happening in Madison, and Madison residents not knowing too much about it. Yeah, and so Kawaoka is one of the biggest proponents of science for science sake. He started a group of sort of virologists and affiliated scientists who with the moniker of scientists, the freedom, having the freedom to do science. Yeah, but that's not the exact moniker, but sort of a paraphrasing of that. But scientists with the right to do science.
Yeah, I think they're called scientists for science.
Thank you.
I think that's their group name. It's
scientists for science, and so you can just imagine using science here as the sort of I won't say scapegoat, but as a straw man, as the fulcrum to prop up an entire very problematic, definitely debatable set of research agendas that the public should definitely know much more about, and which universities like University of Wisconsin-Madison and other land-grant universities in the U.S. Are keeping under wraps.
Well, I'm glad you're doing all of these Freedom of Information Act requests, because hopefully we'll get a lot more light shined on this. Let's get back to the issue of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the investigation that the National Institutes of Health said that they were doing. They sent out this letter to EcoHealth Alliance. They asked for inspections of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They also wanted a sample of the new coronavirus that Shizhen Li and her colleagues at the Wuhan Institute of Virology used to isolate its genetic sequence during the first week of January. So this is very interesting. So the first lab to identify COVID-19 was this same lab that was storing and manipulating coronaviruses and SARS-like viruses. And apparently they didn't share the genetic sequence. Like, why does the National Institute of Health have to ask for a sample of the virus? This is not, don't scientists like make this available normally? Why do we have to ask?
They normally make viral isolates available and share it so that other groups can not only verify it, but also do further experiments with it. Of course, crediting the original group that gave you the virus as well. So there is a credit system, there is a system of recognition, there is a system of information flow that is recognized and it's expected to be followed. It's a scientific norm. And so in this case, the particular viral isolate that's at issue is the RATG13, the bat coronavirus that the Wuhan Institute of Virology identified as the closest relative, closest ancestor of SARS-CoV-2. And they have it supposedly in their institute, in the lab, until they did not have it, according to them. The reason that they've given for not being able to share the viral isolate is that they depleted all the sample while doing the genomic analyses. And so the sample's depleted, it's gone. There's no more to give. Sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah. I suppose that happens.
No,
But it
doesn't.
it doesn't
Typically
happen.
not. Typically not. It's
Huh.
strange. It's
Yeah.
strange. Of course, this shouldn't lead one to conclude that that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was involved in a lab leak, but it does raise serious questions about the reliability of Wuhan Institute of Virology scientists and the claims that they're making about this supposedly this bad coronavirus, a sample for which doesn't exist, but that they sequenced and now they say is the closest relative of SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, it would be, with something this important, you would want the scientists to do it right. And because what you do is you can, if you have a sample of the virus, you can grow more virus, right? So normally you wouldn't run out. Yeah. So another thing so going back to this letter of investigation from the National Institutes of Health to EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they had another question about this virus that you were talking about, RATG13. This is the bat-derived coronavirus in its collection with the greatest similarity to SARS-CoV-2. And what the NIH wanted to know is why the Wuhan Institute of Virology didn't initially mention in its published work, and when the virus happened, that this virus was actually isolated from an abandoned mine where 3 men died in 2012 with an illness that is remarkably similar to COVID-19. Can you tell us more about this story? How did it? Yeah.
Yeah, the plot gets thicker, right? And as you look more and more, you just start finding more and more anomalies that don't match the original script, the original claim about this RATG13 bat coronavirus. So correct. Just yesterday, or I believe a day before yesterday, Xi Zhengli's laboratory published an addendum to their Nature article that had initially announced RATG13. And in this addendum, just published 1 or 2 days ago, is the revelation of this virus. That the genomic sequence was actually identified in 2012 from bats collected from bat samples collected in this abandoned mine shaft in Yunnan province. That the miners had died. Those who were exposed to feces of bats or other parts of bats in these caves. Xi Zhengli's addendum claims that their analyses did not find SARS-like virus infections in these bodies. That claim, which is not which doesn't accompany data, the addendum doesn't show data toward that. It's just a claim. It goes against the claim of a master's thesis and a doctoral thesis that had been published a few years ago, in which SARS-related antibodies were detected in the miners who died. So, suggesting a SARS-like infection.
Right, and as I recall, in that master's thesis, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was one of the labs that the local hospital was sending the viruses out to.
Correct.
So they even helped establish that this was a SARS-like virus. And the SARS expert in all of China was involved in this because it was such a big deal. If, they got rid of SARS back in, it was 2003, they're finally rid of SARS. And then there's a case in a hospital that appears to be a SARS virus. Yeah, I hadn't heard yet about this addendum. Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Right. Of course, but I mean, none of us would know about this if not for a group on social media that has been investigating quite a bit of these issues. They go by this acronym DRASTIC, DRASTIC, decentralized radical. I'm reading this out. I had to write this down. Decentralized Radical Autonomous Search Team investigating COVID-19. These folks have been doing some important investigations, and if not for them, we would not have known about the PhD and master's theses, which are in the Chinese language, that then got translated, and it's only because of them that we know about this abandoned mineshaft connection, which was obfuscated. Let me repeat, which was hidden by Xi Zhengli's group in their announcement of RATG 13 in January. They made it seem like Xi Zhengli's group made it seem like that the SARS-CoV-2 happened, and they went looking in their viral database of viruses and found this genomic sequence that was 96% match to SARS-CoV-2. And so then they went ahead and sequenced that virus fully, and that was RATG13. Only later does it come out that actually RATG13 is the same as a sample known as numbered 4991 coronavirus, bat coronavirus 4991, that they had published about in 2016, the same group. But they didn't cite this paper. They didn't cite the references to 4991. So for a reader just coming in, looking at the Nature paper announcing RATG13, you wouldn't make a connection between RATG13 and BT coronavirus 4991. It was only detective work that then led folks to public and media people to make this connection, right? And then realizing that actually, in Xi Zhengli's own words, they had the full genome sequence of this bad coronavirus 4991, RATG13, in 2018. So they already knew about this genome sequence, which was a beta coronavirus in the same group of coronaviruses as SARS-CoV-2, with a genome sequence. At that time, they didn't know about SARS-CoV-2 in 2018, but it was close enough to SARS coronavirus, the original SARS coronavirus, and had genetic motifs in it that were close enough to SARS-CoV that would make it interesting to look into. And this was a group that was looking into, bad coronaviruses with potential for human sort of spillover, right? So it's very interesting that they obfuscated all of this connections. Did they want public to not know about the miners who died in the same cave where 4991 was found, RATG13? What is the reason? It's not clear why Xi Zhengli's group hid this connection. According to them, it's just a change in nomenclature. That they just made a change in nomenclature that is more technically accurate, and that's all. And they made a mistake of not citing their previous paper. But when you start seeing mistake after mistake, quote unquote mistake after mistake, sample depleted, traces to the mineshaft miners' deaths obfuscated. There's just too many mistakes happening here, and it makes one wonder what is really going on. And that's why I think the calls for investigations, credible investigation, independent, full, transparent investigations of what is going on in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, I think need to be heeded.
Yeah. Well, I have a clarifying question here on Facebook. Someone asks, somebody tell me what this RATG13 he's talking about is. Is this an early version of COVID? So just to clarify, when COVID-19 was first sampled in Wuhan, China, it was taken to labs, and of course, people who work on coronaviruses, like Shizheng Li and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, she told Science Magazine, as I recall, that she couldn't sleep. She was up all night. What if this virus that just happened in her city where she works was similar to one of the viruses that she's working on in her lab? And so she surveyed all of her viruses, and she found that this virus was the one that was closest to SARS-CoV-2. So that's why it's so important to talk about, because if we want to figure out the origins of the coronavirus, of COVID-19, the closest known virus that any scientist has access to is this virus, RATG13. And so now figuring out the origin of that virus is very interesting. And as Sai has been telling us, the origin of the virus has been obfuscated. Shizheng Li wanted to tell the world about the virus, but she didn't want to tell the world where it came from. I hate to get into, when you start thinking about why, then you really are getting into the realm of conspiracy theories, like why would she hide this? And it's always good to, I guess, give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that there's no malice involved. But it did occur to me that you would think that if this is, like you said, Sai, this is her work. Her work is to predict pandemics by surveying animal viruses and figuring out how they might spill over to human beings. So you would think that what happened with the miners in Yunnan would have been a perfect example. You have miners cleaning guano out of a cave. That's something that human beings have done for millennia. Guano is great fertilizer, and you might just want to clean the guano out because you're going to mine something else. There are a lot of reasons to go clean guano out of a cave. And so they ended up getting sick from a bat coronavirus when they were doing this. This is what Shizheng Li does. This is the reason that she gives for her work. I want to be there and make sure that we know what to do when someone is sickened by an animal virus. And yet, like you say, Sai, she decided not to mention that, not in her interviews with the scientific press and the public press, not in her journal articles, even the ones that were published before SARS-CoV-2 emerged. And so for some reason, she didn't want to talk about the miners. We had a question that ties into this. One of our viewers wanted to know about Dr. Lee Meng Yang, because she has made an explosive accusation against the Chinese government. She is a scientist who's been working in Hong Kong. She's Chinese, working in Hong Kong, and she was part of the World Health Organization's viral team. And so she early on had some work related to SARS-CoV-2. And she was very critical of the way that the Chinese government was handling the virus. And then she stumbled across some information about the way this virus is constructed genetically that made her think that made her link it to viruses that the Chinese military had collected. So we talked early on about the reasons why scientists do this so-called gain-of-function research that make viruses that aren't harming human beings more dangerous to us. And sadly, most major governments, including the United States, maintain labs where they experiment on viruses and make them more dangerous for so-called biodefense, but it's almost indistinguishable from bioweapons development. And the Chinese government has done this, just like the United States government has done. So Lee Meng Yang, Dr. Lee Meng Yang says that she thinks that this virus emerged not from something that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was collecting, although the Wuhan Institute of Virology's work with scientists like Ralph Baric is essential to developing the virus to make it become something like SARS-CoV-2. So the Wuhan Institute of Virology does figure in the accusations that Lee Meng Yang has put forward. But her theory is that this was just straight up biological weapons work that the Chinese government was engaged in, and they either released it intentionally or it leaked out of a bioweapons lab. So one of the interesting things about Lee Meng Yang's theory is that I follow the same Twitter feed of all of these scientists who are part of this group Drastic, and they're all mostly all anonymous. But one of them was ended up publishing with Lee Meng Yang. His Twitter handle is Nerd Has Power, and he is also published on Medium as Nerd Has Power. And then he ended up publishing with Lee Meng Yang, which made me give a lot of credibility to Lee Meng Yang because he was part of this group of scientists who seemed to just want to know the truth. But then the Lee Meng Yang team ended up publishing or making public statements and publishing, saying that they don't think that the story about the miners is important. And that's when I started to think, nobody knows, but it seems like why wouldn't this story about the miners be important? If somebody got a SARS-like virus that ended up being extremely similar to the SARS-like virus, COVID-19, that is sweeping the globe and killing hundreds of thousands of people, why wouldn't we think that this story about the miners is important? So that's my little rant about Lee Meng Yang. But Sai, what are, on any topic that she's spoken about or published on, what are your thoughts on Dr. Lee Meng Yang's work?
I don't have an opinion. I think that we need evidence. I think we need more evidence before being able to conclude about connections to bioweapons, that SARS-CoV-2 being developed as a bioweapon. We seriously need more evidence to be able to say that, and without that evidence, I cannot say anything about it. I think I'll double back on the call that others are making, that we need to open up the Wuhan Institute of Virology and also the Wuhan Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, their records of what kind of experiments they've been doing. And this is something that NIH may know about. Were there any biosafety mishaps that happened in the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Was there any potential deliberate release that may have happened? Have there been past instances? And this is something that we are querying through our Freedom of Information requests with the federal agencies, with defense intelligence agencies as well. I want to stress one point here about RATG13, which is that it may be a red herring, okay? Because there were other viruses that were found in that cave, supposedly, in that abandoned mine shaft. In the 2016-2017 paper, where Shi Zhengli's group talked about BT-COVID-4991, they only mentioned 2 beta coronaviruses that were found in that cave. In this addendum, they said that 9 beta coronaviruses were found in that cave. So something is not matching up. And again, beta coronaviruses are the group of coronaviruses within which SARS-CoV-2 lies and within which RATG13 is as well. So the point I want to stress on is that the Wuhan Institute of Virology has unpublished, unreported viruses in its database and in its laboratory archives, viral isolates of those viruses as well, manipulated versions of those viruses as well. So there may be a more closely related version of a bad coronavirus in their archives. That's not RATG13, but something else that they found in that cave. We don't know, and that's why we need to know what is the database of viruses. They shut down, the Wuhan Institute of Virology shut down that virus database late in December of 2019, as news of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 was beginning to gather steam. And so the public and scientists are not able to access that virus database of Wuhan Institute of Virology. Do other scientists from other public universities who collaborated with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, do they have access? Did they have access to that database? Did they take records of that database before it got shut down? These are some open questions, and I think we need to pursue those records.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy, Sai. This is exciting. We only have a little bit of time left if we're going to keep it to an hour. So I do want to cover, at least talk about your lawsuit. One of the questions that came earlier on, somebody wanted to know, well, why didn't the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, just give you the records request that you asked for? And why? So they didn't. And what was the excuse that they gave? They have to give an excuse that's a legal excuse under the law, because they're supposed to produce records unless there's a good reason. So what was the reason?
Right. So the Freedom of Information Act, as some of you may know, is a legal, a law that allows you to anybody in the public, even non-U.S. citizens, to ask for governmental records. Okay. The FOIA also, the FOIA Act, this Freedom of Information Act, also has a set of exemptions that allow the government to say, well, we can't share certain parts of these records because they're exempt from release for these and these and these reasons. They're exempt perhaps for national security reasons, perhaps because there are proprietary or commercial reasons. The specific exemption under which the NIH denied us our request is exemption 7A under FOIA, which is that there is a pending law enforcement investigation going on.
Well, was that?
We don't know.
I mean, that's just, in a way, it's always frustrating to have a FOIA request denied, because we're the public, we paid for this, we should have access to this. On the other hand, for them to say that they're investigating, that really, it makes, you've given so many good reasons to do an investigation, but, most people would call us crazy. They would say, get off it. It's just a natural virus that leaped from bats to pangolins probably, and then to humans. Like, why are you so interested in this? It seemed like the National Institutes of Health, when they used that reason to deny you these documents, it sort of reinforces your point, right?
It does, but it also raises a whole host of other ones, which is who's being investigated and for what? Is EcoHealth Alliance being investigated or not? If EcoHealth Alliance is being investigated by the NIH as part of or by the federal government as part of law enforcement proceedings, why did the NIH turn around and give the EcoHealth Alliance several more $1 million in July, August to start up more research of the kind that may have led to a lab accident release? Why did the NIH give the EcoHealth Alliance more money then, if they're really investigating EcoHealth Alliance? If they're not investigating EcoHealth Alliance, and if they're investigating Wuhan Institute of Virology or the other institutes in Wuhan, what is that investigation? And we understand that that data may not be available to the public because certain disclosures may endanger the actual investigation. We understand that, but we appealed the NIH's denial because our ask was not only specifically related to the Wuhan pseudovirology. Our ask was a broader one, and we also wanted to know about what the NIH knows regarding biodefense and bio threat related issues connected to China. And so this is beyond any specific law enforcement investigation or any specific enforceable activity, as it would be called in legal terms. And so those are the grounds for our appeal. And the lawsuit is what we're saying is that, okay, perhaps certain part of our request is exempt from release, that you can't share those records with us because there's a law enforcement investigation. But then you can't give us a blanket denial. You can't just give us a blanket denial because there are other parts of our request that we argue are not exempt from release, meaning they're broad enough that they're not part of, they can't be part of any enforcement investigations. NIH cannot be investigating China and biodefense. That's just too large of an entity for the NIH to go after. We can imagine Wuhan pseudovirology being under the radar. And so the grounds for the lawsuit are precisely this, that the NIH needs to release some records that we've been asking, connected to China, biothreat, biodefense. And we are hoping that that would actually lead the NIH to release some related interesting information.
Well, I wish you the best with this lawsuit. It needs to be successful. We need to get this information out. A lot of people want, they want the sources of this information. They want sites. They want to read more. You have compiled an incredible bibliography on the U.S. Right to Know site. I was thinking perhaps you could share your screen and take us to the U.S. Right to Know website and show us around the site and show us where we can find this information, because I don't think that there is any other website that exists that has all of the articles and scientific papers related to the origin of SARS-CoV-2 that's as comprehensive as what you have at US Right to Know.
I'd be happy to do that. I think I would ask you to guide me through this process so that I'm not going to commit any technical glitches. So I should open the browser in Chrome?
Yes, I think.
Hang on for a moment. I'm going to try and do that. Yeah. I'd be happy to show folks this website.
Yeah, US Right to Know is a fantastic website in general. If you're interested in glyphosate, Monsanto's Roundup, Carrie Gillum and Stacy Malcolm and Gary Ruskin, Sai's colleagues, have been doing the most incredible job of marshaling the science, following the lawsuits. So there are a lot of reasons to follow the US Right to Know website and to join the mailing list for US Right to Know. Sai, are you ready to share your screen?
I think so. Yes, I think so. Let's see. So can you see the biohazards webpage?
We're getting close. Yes, here it is. Okay.
Great. And so we are on the usrtk.org/biohazards. And then if you scroll down, you'll see our biohazards blog on our latest reporting on documents that we gathered, public records request, documents we gathered from the University of Maryland, showing how EcoHealth Alliance orchestrated a whole key scientist statement in an important medical journal, overwhelmingly concluding that SARS-CoV-2 has a natural origin. And this supposedly independent scientist statement was the handiwork of EcoHealth Alliance employees. The emails we gathered show very clearly. So you can, for example, open the Biohazards blog and look at that article that just came out yesterday. And if you go down the page, you're able to link to the entire batch of emails that we pulled. And so you can actually, folks can actually look at this raw data and you can make your own conclusions. Yeah. We want to be a site that pursues truth and transparency. And so these records are just open for you to look at, anybody in the public to look at.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
So we also have a readings list that Alexis mentioned, and if you're looking for sources, either media sources from reputable media sources, or also scientific papers on various approaches and theories about the origins of SARS-CoV-2, including natural origins and possibly lab origins. These are all, many of the main papers are here, including the one that we talked about at the very end, Alexis, by Lee Meng Yang.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to end this for now. I would love to go on talking with you, but you'll have to promise that you'll come back and update us frequently, because you broke a lot of news right now on our conversation, which I didn't expect. So I feel very lucky to get to be one of the first people to talk to you after you've published really news-making information that you've gleaned from your investigation. So keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me. I'll come back if you invite me. Of course, I'd be happy to come back. Yes, my pleasure.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much. You have a good night. And thank you to everybody who participated. We'll continue the discussion here on Facebook. And please join us for our next video. And please share this video if you have friends who really aren't getting why this is such an important topic of discussion and investigation. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Alexis.